Hello there, people of the internet. I'm going to go ahead and talk with you guys about some of my shortcuts for reloading, just to like save time and effort and whatnot. YouTuber viewer, I'm sure you're going to be watching this. This is not me teaching people how to manufacture their own ammunition. As a matter of fact, I'm going out of my way to ensure that I do not violate YouTube's community guidelines. I will not be showing anyone how to actually do anything. I'm just going to be talking about what I do, and that is in compliance with their guidelines. So first things first, I have my Lee Metford here. I actually have a #1 Mark III bolt on this thing right now, but this is going to be what serves for our representation for this particular video. I was loading up some black powder 303 British to run through this Lee Metford because I like running black powder 303 British through this Lee Metford. It's one of those things, since I make my own gunpowder, I can do it quite cheaply, especially because I've already got my own brass. But for the Lee Metford, I have this bag right here, and this bag is already fired 303 British ammo, and it was brand new. It was already fired through this particular rifle. Now what that means is that that brass is fire formed to the chamber of this rifle, and what that means is the likelihood of you having to size your brass is quite small, unless you fire something through a rifle that maybe has an overpressure situation or something like that. Because the brass has already been fire formed to the chamber of your specific rifle, you should just be able to take your already fired brass, this is how I check it, and throw it into your chamber. Bolt should close. There's no extractor on this bolt, so I do have to use a screwdriver to pull this out. Come on, get under that rim. Yeah, she pulls out pretty gosh darn easily. Definitely easily enough for me to feel comfortable shoving this thing back into a chamber. So I don't have to worry about sizing my brass if I'm running that ammo through the same rifle, the same chamber, same everything, assuming that, like I said, we didn't have any overpressure situation. So that cuts out one step of me having to worry about the reloading process. I'm trying to cut out as many steps as possible because of how much reloading I actually do. So if I have a fire-formed chamber or a fire-formed piece of brass for the chamber of a specific rifle, then I won't bother sizing that. What I will do is, as you fire it, the brass will stretch, and I'll just keep an eye on it with my calibers. You can look up on Google or wherever how long your length is supposed to be for your brass before you're supposed to trim it. But where most of your expansion, or where most of your stretching with your brass comes from, is expanding into a chamber and then sizing it back down and then doing that over and over and over. I have found that the brass that I have fire formed to the chamber of the rifles that I shoot them in, if I don't size them, like, I haven't had any issues with needing to trim them either. As a matter of fact, I think that, where is it at? I have this batch of 308 black powder rounds, and black powder burns at a pretty low pressure, and that's probably one of the reasons why these 303 British rounds, like these 303 British brass rounds, are lasting so long as well. But these 308 rounds, these don't like stretch at all. They're fire formed to the chamber for my Oviedo Mauser, so I don't bother sizing these either. And I have taken these out and shot them, like this exact batch, probably over 50 times at this point. Just because, again, black powder, I can load my own ammo and shoot it quite cheaply. So I don't bother sizing anything that is already fire formed for a particular rifle with its particular chamber. Keep an eye on it. Pay attention to if you have to trim it. So on top of that, what I also have here, take note on how I did not show any sort of manufacturing here, Mr. YouTube reviewer. I also have this right here. This is a universal decapping tool, and this is actually something that one of you guys sent me, and they normally run like, I don't know, 20 bucks or something like that. This is probably one of the best investments that you can get your hands on, because unlike having to run a cartridge, like lubricate it, run it through a sizing die that has a decapper on it or something like that, this right here, you just put your round right into this little chamber right here, and you squeeze it and it punches out the cap, and it's a really, really fast way to be able to decap a lot of brass really quickly. And then putting a primer back in, I have this universal priming tool right here. You normally have this little attachment that sticks into the side right there, but I've just used this thing so much and I actually ended up breaking that one night. I have no idea how it actually broke, but I woke up the next morning and it was broken. So normally what I do is I just take the primer, set it on top, and you slide your cartridge in right there. As a matter of fact, I'll show you guys that. This is empty. There is no manufacturing going on here. As a matter of fact, this still has a primer still in it. But you take your cartridge, you set it inside this thing, and then you push a primer up into it. And it's a really good way to be able to prime a lot of cartridges really quickly. I got the one, put it in there, primed. Next one, put it in there, primed. Next one, put it in there, primed. It's just a fast way of doing it, as opposed to especially if you just have like a single stage reloader or something like that. It's a fast way to be able to do things like reloading without needing to swap out a bunch of dies or a bunch of anything like that. And on top of that, if I'm loading smokeless powder, I just bumped my camera stand, I'm sorry about that. If I'm loading smokeless powder, I use, for the most part, this right here. This is a powder measuring kit. A lot of people will use like a scale. I also have a scale. In the event that I want to use a scale. But a lot of people, they'll use a scale and whatnot, but something like that takes a lot of time, or they'll have like more sophisticated equipment to really adequately measure something out. But what these right here are, is they are essentially little tiny, we're going to call them spoons, that have all different sorts of sizes to them. And they come with this little, we're going to call it pamphlets. I'm not quite sure what you would call this, but we're going to call it pamphlet. And what this pamphlet is it has all of your extremely common smokeless powders on it, and it has a lot of different variations. And then it tells you what size spoon you need for what amount of grains of gunpowder for your particular go-to gunpowder. Like, for example, if I'm loading something with IMR 4064, which is right there, and let's say that I need, I don't know, 50 grains of the stuff, it looks like the 3.70 spoon gives me 49.7 grains. So that is close enough. So I would come grab my 3.7 spoon, and then I would dip it into my 4064, pour it into the cartridge, and I'd be off to the races. So normally I undercharge my cartridges by about 10%, and that helps with recoil. It conserves gunpowder. It stops brass from stretching nearly as much as it normally would to help prolong brass life. It's a really good way to get the best bang for your buck, in my personal opinion. Undercharging by 10%, that means that you get like essentially a free cartridge for every 9 that you load, because you have 10% more gunpowder that would normally not be used. But with this right here, you don't have to worry about that sophisticated equipment and taking like specific measurements with a scale or anything like that. All you do with this, you grab your spoon, gunpowder, pour, and it's a good way to load a lot of ammo really quickly. And this right here, for the most part, is how I load my ammo. Now, bear in mind that what I'm doing here is I am not making match grade ammo. I'm making ammo that I'm going to go out and plink at the gun range with at 50 yards. I'm making ammo that's probably going to be about 4 to 6 MOA, because just from the powder measuring alone, like the lack of the unsophisticated way that I'm measuring powder, just because of that right there, it's going to be inconsistent in terms of exact powder charges. It's going to be consistent enough to where I'm not going to just be blowing rounds all over the range. Like, it's going to be probably about as consistent as military surplus ammunition, because military surplus ammunition can vary like up to 3 to 5 grains per cartridge, which is quite a lot. But you're not going to get tremendous accuracy out of what it is that I'm doing here, but for the intents and purposes of what I use these guns for, the accuracy is definitely good enough. So after I don't size my brass, and after I just do give it a quick measure to make sure that it doesn't need trimmed. And I don't measure it every single time that I shoot it. I'll measure it probably every 10th time that I shoot it, because of most of the calibers that I use, most of them don't need to be trimmed anyway after every firing if they have full power, full pressure ammunition, and I'm loading mine with black powder. So I measure maybe every 10th. If you're using smokeless powder, maybe measure every 5th time that that you use that cartridge. But I don't size it. I measure it out. I prime or I deprime and I prime it with those tools that I showed you guys. It's very, very quick and simple and easy. And then whatever gunpowder it is I'm using, I just use those dips and I toss it in there. Then I use a bullet seating die and a crimp die, and those right there tend to work extraordinarily well. If I come across brass, one of the things that you use a sizing die for is the sizing die actually squishes the neck of the cartridge down ever so slightly, so you have tension on the bullet whenever you push sizing, or whenever you push a seating die or a bullet from a seating die into it. This way it doesn't just fall down into the actual gunpowder itself. Without that sizing die step in the process, the neck oftentimes is expanded to the point to where a round would just kind of plop into that. So oftentimes, before I use that seating die, I'll actually use my crimp die, and I'll crimp it down ever so slightly just to give it some tension, and then I'll seat that bullet and I'll crimp it again, which is not a very difficult step at all. So that's one of the ways how I load ammunition, not good quality ammunition, but I load ammunition very, very quickly to be able to take out to the range. I'd say like a 20 round box of 303 British, doing these steps without having to worry about the sizing or anything like that, I could probably do it in maybe 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how encouraged I am. But yeah, it is quite simple. Like the full steps. Take this right here, already fired through that Lee Metford, which I'll be firing it again, so I don't have to worry about it. These are only fired once brass, so I don't have to worry about trimming. Take the primer out, can't show you guys because of YouTube rules. Put the primer in, scoop gunpowder, pour it in there, and then take this, set it into my my press, which I currently don't have here with me, with the seating die, bullet on top. Squeeze it. If the bullet just sinks inside of it and I decide that it needs to be crimped to add a little extra tension, then I'll crimp it, bullet seat, crimp it again. It's quite quick, quite easy. So that is just kind of how I do my fast reloading. There are ways that I do better reloading than that. Like, this is just mag dumping into garbage ammunition. This is fun YouTube plinking ammunition. Somewhere around here I'm actively looking for something, that's why I'm not staring at the camera. Somewhere around here I have ammunition specifically loaded to a spec for my TOZ 122 308 hunting rifle. And I do not see it. Maybe I brought it into the other room. Maybe I took it and put it back into my ammo storage. I don't know. I'll have to hunt that down because that's my hunting ammo. But the TOZ 122, which is my bolt-action hunting rifle right here, I have loaded ammunition up for this thing, specifically this thing, that is going to run exceptionally well. First thing I did was I took my 308 brassing, I formed it to the chamber of this rifle. So in doing that, you have really, really, really consistent ammunition, the fire forming of the chamber. And it's only single fired brass, so it's not going to be stretched all that much. But every single case I went through and I took my calipers and I trimmed it all down to like 1/100th of an inch within the same spec. And then on top of that, I added exactly 43 grains of 4064, like down to 1/10 of a grain. And I have, I believe, Spear soft point 150 grain boat tail bullets. I think that's the brand of bullet that I'm using in that thing. And combine all of those very consistent specs. And every single one of those bullets, I weighed them out to make sure that they were exactly 150 grain. Not 150.1, not 149.9, exactly 150 grain. All of those specs added together leads to extraordinarily accurate ammunition, basically on any rifle. But this particular rifle, this has a 1 in 14 twist in it. And it stabilizes 150 grain bullets extremely well. Like, this right here is by far probably my most accurate rifle if I were to load up proper ammunition like that. So, I know how to load proper ammunition, but my fast ammunition is good enough for what it is that I actually use this ammo for. So, thanks for watching. Appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below is a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off. Have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you all later.
Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Gary. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.